The morning mist still clung to the bathroom mirror, blurring my reflection as I reached for the small, carved wooden box on the vanity. It was a ritual, a silent promise I made to myself every day. My fingers, accustomed to the familiar weight, found only velvet lining, empty. My breath hitched. The silver locket, a gift from my grandmother on my 18th birthday, was gone. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced through the lingering warmth of my shower. I tore through the drawers, my hands fumbling, heart hammering against my ribs. Under the bath mat, behind the spare toiletries, nothing. That locket wasn't just metal. It held a tiny, faded photograph of my grandmother, her eyes sparkling with a love that had always felt like an anchor. I never took it off. Not for work, not for sleep, not even for a shower. It was a part of me. I stood there, a hollow ache spreading through my chest, when the sound of footsteps echoed in the hallway. My husband, Arthur, appeared, carrying a tray. On it, my favorite ceramic mug, chipped at the rim, steaming with the herbal tea he made me every morning. He smiled. That easy, charming smile that had once disarmed me, made me believe in a future woven with shared tenderness. "You're up early," he said, setting the tray on my bedside table. "I was going to bring this to you." "My locket is missing," I stated, my voice flat, watching his face for any flicker of genuine surprise. He paused, his smile faltering just a fraction. "Your locket?" He repeated the word, a common tactic I knew, to buy time, to compose oneself. He then walked into the bathroom, his gaze sweeping over the vanity, a perfunctory search that lacked any real urgency. He wasn't looking for the locket, he was looking at me, gauging my reaction. "I don't see it," he said, returning to the bedroom. "Did you perhaps leave it at your sister's last weekend? Or maybe in your studio?" "I never take it off, Arthur. You know that." My voice remained steady, a carefully constructed dam against the rising tide of suspicion. He came closer, placing his hands on my shoulders, his thumbs tracing slow, deliberate circles on the tense muscles near my collarbone. It was a gesture I had once found comforting, a familiar touch that spoke of care and understanding. I had told him years ago that was where I held my stress, and he had remembered. For 5 years, I had called that attentiveness love. "It's just a locket, dearest. We'll find it. And if we can't, I'll get you something even better, something that truly suits you." He offered a small, affectionate smile, the kind that implied my attachment to the old silver piece was a quaint, slightly irrational quirk. Something that truly suits you. I had heard variations of that line before. Replacing things, improving things, gently, continuously reshaping my preferences until I could no longer distinguish my own desires from his carefully curated suggestions. His hands were warm, the pressure precise. The same pressure applied to the same coordinates with the reliability of a calibrated instrument. I had spent years believing that consistency was the signature of genuine care. Standing there, in my robe, with his hands on my shoulders and my locket gone, I began to reframe it as something else entirely. Control. "You're right," I said, stepping back from his touch, making the movement appear as weariness rather than withdrawal. "I probably left it somewhere silly. Let me check my coat pockets. I think I may have put it there on Sunday." He nodded, picking up the tea tray. "Get warm first. I'll check the studio if you want." He left the room, his footsteps fading down the hallway. The moment the sound was gone, I moved. My jacket, draped over the armchair, held my phone in its inside pocket. One missed call. My father. I pressed my back against the closet door, the cold wood a stark contrast to the sudden chill in my heart, and called him back. He answered before the first ring finished. "Alara." His voice, usually a warm, resonant baritone, was stripped bare, a raw edge of urgency I had never heard before. My father, Marcus Thorne, a man who had navigated the treacherous waters of corporate finance for decades, had faced down market crashes and boardroom coups without a tremor in his voice. Not when my mother passed, not when his company faced its biggest challenge. Never. "Dad, what's wrong?" "Stop looking for it. Take Lily and leave now. Your brother is waiting downstairs." My world tilted. The locket, the tea, Arthur's practiced smile. It all coalesced into a terrifying clarity. My father didn't just know about the locket. He knew it was a signal. A warning. "What are you talking about?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. "No time, Alara. Just go. Lily's school bag is packed. Your brother has everything else you need. Trust me." I trusted my father implicitly. He was a man of unwavering integrity, a rock in every storm. If he said leave, I left. I walked to Lily's room. She was still asleep, a small, peaceful bundle under her unicorn duvet, utterly oblivious to the storm brewing around her. 5 years old, and I needed to keep her untouched by whatever darkness was now encroaching on our lives. I dressed quickly, my hands shaking as I pulled on jeans and a sweater. I grabbed Lily's pre-packed bag, then gently woke her. "Time for an adventure, sweet pea," I murmured, trying to inject a lightness I didn't feel into my voice. She blinked, her big brown eyes still heavy with sleep, then offered a small, trusting smile. As we descended the stairs, my brother, Julian, was waiting by the curb, his face grim. He didn't speak, just opened the car door for us, his gaze sweeping the street with an intensity that spoke volumes. We drove in silence, the city lights blurring past, until we reached a quiet, unassuming house on the outskirts of town. It was a safe house, Julian explained, set up by my father years ago, just in case. "In case of what?" I asked, a knot of dread tightening in my stomach. Julian turned to me, his eyes filled with a weary sadness. "Alara, Dad's been worried about Arthur for a while. He's been monitoring things." "Monitoring what? What does any of this have to do with my locket?" He sighed, running a hand through his dark hair. "The locket isn't just a locket, sis. Dad had a tiny tracking device, a nanochip, embedded in it years ago. A precaution. After what happened with Mom, he became very protective. It's connected to our family's private servers. It's a silent alarm." My mind reeled. My grandmother's locket, a symbol of love and memory, was also a beacon, a silent guardian, and it had been activated. "Arthur, he took it," I said, the realization hitting me with the force of a physical blow. "He must have known." "We don't know for sure what he knew, or when," Julian said gently. "But the chip registered an attempted tampering this morning. That's why Dad called. He wanted you out before Arthur could react." The next few days were a blur of hushed conversations, legal documents, and a terrifying sense of unreality. My father, with his formidable legal team, was already in motion. He had suspected Arthur of financial irregularities for months, quiet discrepancies in the family trust that Arthur managed. My locket's disappearance had simply confirmed his worst fears. "He was siphoning funds," my father explained, his voice tight with controlled fury. "Small amounts at first, then larger. He was betting on you not noticing, not questioning. He thought he had you completely isolated, completely dependent." The kindness I had cherished, the attentive gestures, the gentle suggestions, they were all part of a meticulously crafted cage. He wanted me to be a certain way, to prefer certain things, to rely on him for everything. My art studio, my passion, had slowly become a hobby he indulged, rather than a serious pursuit. My friends, once a vibrant part of my life, had gradually drifted away, subtly discouraged by Arthur's possessive charm. He had been isolating me, piece by piece, until I was a reflection of his desires, not my own. The betrayal was a physical ache, a raw wound that throbbed with every memory of his smile, his touch, his carefully chosen words. He hadn't loved me, he had cultivated me, like a rare orchid, for his own benefit. One evening, while Lily was asleep, Julian brought me a tablet. "Dad wants you to see this," he said, his expression unreadable. It was a live feed, a hidden camera in my own living room. Arthur was there, on my sofa, with a woman I didn't recognize. She was leaning against his shoulder, her hand resting casually on his arm. On my coffee table, without a coaster, sat my chipped ceramic mug, the one Arthur made my tea in every morning. She took a long, comfortable sip. "She's completely gone quiet," Arthur said, rubbing his face with both hands. "No response to my posts, no public statement, Nothing. That's worse than if she'd come out swinging, the woman, Jessica said. She pulled the mug away from her lips and set it down, a tiny, disproportionate flash of fury igniting within me at the casual disrespect. Of all the things to feel right now, a chipped mug. Silence means she's building something. Who's she got in her corner? Her brother? Her father? Arthur's voice was tight, a thin veneer of concern, barely concealing a deeper fear. Silas Montgomery. Jessica sat up straighter. Montgomery? The federal litigation guy? Yeah, Arthur, that's not good. Montgomery doesn't do divorces, he does takedowns. Her indulgent warmth had vanished, replaced by a sharper, more calculating tone. Arthur pressed his fingers against his eyes. I know that. Then we need to move faster on the narrative. Get someone from her old firm to go on record. A former colleague, a competitor, anyone who will say she was always a little unstable, that the breakdown has been coming for years. Jessica reached over and gripped his arm. You need to control what people believe about her before she gets the chance to show them anything real. And if she already has something real? Arthur's voice dropped lower, and a chill snaked up my spine. Not guilt, but a cold, hard calculation running up against the edge of its own limits. Jessica let out a short, dismissive breath. What does she have? She ran out of the apartment in her slippers, carrying a 5-year-old. She has her daddy's lawyers and a grudge. She doesn't have anything we can't manage. She picked up my mug again, taking another long, comfortable sip. My hand was shaking so hard I had to use my other hand to steady it over the trackpad. The shake wasn't grief, not exactly. It wasn't even anger, not purely. It was the particular physical response to watching someone underestimate you with such absolute confidence that it becomes almost clarifying. She didn't know about the locket's chip. She didn't know about the forensic accountants my father had already engaged. She didn't know about Julian, or about Silas Montgomery, or about the dozens of client termination notices that would hit Arthur's inbox when he opened his corporate email Monday morning. She didn't know that every single word she was saying into that living room was being recorded at forensic quality on a triple encrypted server in this very library. She thought I had run away. She had no idea I had come home. I pressed record on the server interface and watched the green indicator light up. Then I turned to Julian, who had been standing behind me, reading the feed over my shoulder. He was rigid, barely breathing. Julian, I said, my voice steady as a level surface. I need you to find me the best art replica studio in Boston. Someone who can produce 5 paintings in 72 hours and make them indistinguishable from the originals to any buyer who isn't looking for the frames. Julian blinked, looking from me to the screen where Jessica was now reaching over to pick up Lily's small stuffed rabbit from the end of the sofa, dropping it carelessly onto the floor to make more room for herself. Something moved through Julian's face that was raw and unguarded. I'll have a name in an hour, he said. The art studio Julian found was in Somerville, run by a woman named Petra Moss. She had spent 15 years producing museum-quality replicas for insurance documentation and private collectors. When Julian showed me her portfolio, I looked at reproductions of 3 separate 17th-century oil paintings and felt the familiar, involuntary pull of professional recognition. The brushwork was extraordinary. The aging of the paint surfaces was done with the kind of patience and expertise that took years to develop. Tell her I need 5 pieces by Thursday, I instructed. I'll send her the originals tonight for reference scanning. I want the frames to look worn, not distressed artificially. Actually worn. She'll know what I mean. While Julian made the call, I walked to the east wing of my father's estate, where the climate-controlled storage room held the collection my mother had left me. 14 paintings and 3 bronze sculptures, gathered over 30 years by a woman with a quiet, fierce eye for beauty and an absolute refusal to let anyone tell her what was worth keeping. I stood in the doorway of the storage room and looked at them in the low, careful lighting. The grief that moved through me was a different shape than the grief of the last 2 days. Softer at the edges, older. I'm sorry, Mom, I said out loud to no one. I'll bring them back, I promise. Then I took out my phone. The Instagram account I used for personal posts had fewer than 200 followers, mostly family and close friends. I switched to my professional account, the one I used to showcase my own art. my restoration work. It had over 200,000 followers. I began to compose a post. It wasn't a rant or a plea for sympathy. It was a carefully worded statement announcing the temporary closure of my studio due to unforeseen personal circumstances and hinting at significant changes in my personal and professional life. I attached a photograph of my hands, carefully restoring a delicate 18th century miniature. The caption was simple: "Sometimes, the most important restoration is of oneself." The comments flooded in almost immediately. Support, concern, questions. I didn't respond to any of them. The post wasn't for my followers. It was for Arthur. And for Jessica. It was the first ripple in the carefully constructed narrative I was about to unleash. The replicas were flawless. Petra Moss was a true artist. The frames, aged with a subtle, convincing wear, completed the illusion. Julian and I carefully swapped the originals for the replicas in my apartment, a silent, clandestine operation carried out under the cover of darkness. The originals were then moved to a secure, undisclosed location. Monday morning arrived with a crisp, cold bite. Arthur, unaware of the trap closing around him, went to work. The first wave of client termination notices hit his inbox, each one a carefully crafted legal document from Silas Montgomery's firm, citing breaches of trust and fiduciary duty. The news spread like wildfire through the financial community. Arthur Thorne, the golden boy, was crumbling. The second wave came from my father, a public statement, released to the press, detailing the financial irregularities, the siphoning of funds from the family trust, and the calculated deception. It was clinical, precise, and utterly devastating. The narrative Arthur and Jessica had tried to build, the one that painted me as unstable, as a disgruntled wife, shattered into a million pieces. The final blow came from me. I posted a video on my professional Instagram account. It wasn't a tearful confession or an angry tirade. It was a calm, composed explanation of what had happened, supported by irrefutable evidence. I showed the empty locket box, explained its hidden purpose, and then, with a deliberate slowness, I held up the locket itself, now back around my neck. "Some things," I said, my voice clear and steady, "are more than they appear. And some betrayals, once revealed, cannot be undone." The video went viral. The comments were no longer just questions. They were a tsunami of support, of outrage, of solidarity. Women shared their own stories of subtle manipulation, of quiet erosion of their identities. It became a rallying cry, a testament to the power of truth. Arthur was arrested that afternoon. The evidence was overwhelming. The hidden recordings, the forensic accounting, the testimony of former colleagues who, emboldened by my public statement, finally came forward with their own suspicions. Jessica, his accomplice, was implicated in the financial scheme and faced charges of her own. The legal proceedings were long and arduous, but justice, in the end, prevailed. Arthur was convicted of fraud and embezzlement. The family trust was restored, and my financial independence, once subtly undermined, was now firmly re-established. But the real healing wasn't in the courtroom. It was in the quiet moments. It was in Lily's hand in mine as we walked through the park, her laughter echoing in the crisp autumn air. It was in the renewed sense of purpose I found in my art, in the meticulous work of restoring beauty to damaged things, knowing that I, too, was undergoing a restoration of my own. I found a bench near the park gate and sat down for a moment, while Julian took Lily to the hot chocolate cart at the corner. The morning was very quiet. A ferry moved slowly across the harbor, its wake spreading out behind it in a wide V. Somewhere in the distance, a construction crane was turning. I reached up and touched the locket at my throat. The silver was warm now, warmed to my temperature, part of my surface again. The small scratches Arthur had left when he tried to pry it open were still there. I had not had them buffed out, and I was not going to. Not because I wanted to commemorate what he had done, but because I had learned something important about surfaces in years of working with old things. The marks of what has happened to something are not the same as damage. They are information. They are the record of how a thing has lived. The chip inside the locket blinked its signal every 12 seconds. I had checked the system that morning, and it had connected immediately to the Thorne family servers, as reliable and unchanged as it had always been. Every 12 seconds. Blink, blink, blink. My father had built the original system because a man who has watched his 7-year-old daughter be taken from him does not stop preparing for the worst. And I had built everything else. The nano sentinel, the smart home systems, the fallback protocols. For the same reason, dressed in a different professional language. I had spent my entire career building walls around things that mattered. I had just never thought to build one around myself. "Mommy!" Lily appeared at my elbow with a paper cup in each hand, her face flushed from the cold and completely incandescent with the pleasure of hot chocolate procurement. "I got you one too, with the small marshmallows." "The right ones?" I asked, a smile finally reaching my eyes. "Obviously," she said, climbing onto the bench beside me and leaning against my arm with the trusting, boneless lean of a child who is very warm and very happy and does not need anything in this moment except to be next to the person she loves most. I wrapped both hands around the cup and sat there with my daughter pressed against my side, the harbor spread out before us, and the silver locket warm at my throat. I understood something that I had been approaching for weeks without being able to name it directly. Safety is not something you receive. It is not something a person hands you at an altar or promises you with their eyes full of tears on the steps of an art museum. It is something you build, line by line, system by system, the slow and patient work of someone who has decided that the things worth protecting are worth the labor. The chip blinked. The ferry reached the far shore. Lily drank her hot chocolate with the focused pleasure of someone experiencing something excellent. I drank mine. The marshmallows were the right ones. Looking back, I want to tell you something I wish someone had told me before any of this began. Family betrayal doesn't announce itself with warning signs. It arrives in a cup of honey tea, in 5 years of shared mornings built on a foundation you were never shown. Don't be like me. Don't wait until the evidence is forensic before you trust what you already feel. The part of you quietly counting what doesn't add up. That part has always been right. I'm not a hero in this story. Family betrayal taught me that the most important protection I could build was the one pointed inward, at my own willingness to believe what I wanted to believe. And family revenge, I'll be honest, is not what healed me. The verdict mattered. Justice mattered. But what healed me was my daughter's hand in mine on a cold park bench in December and the quiet certainty that I had built something stronger than what tried to break it. This story is a work of fiction. Any resemblance to real people, events, or places is purely coincidental.